Well, good morning and happy Advent. It seems like so much has happened in Mary's life and in Joseph's life in the last 9 months, but certainly in the last 6 months. And just imagine everything. Mary comes home from visiting Elizabeth, and immediately Mary has to deal with being misunderstood. The girls around the water well are kind of snickering at her and laughing at her, and she's got to deal with all of the drama inside Nazareth. Of course, she has to talk to her parents. Of course, Mary has to have the conversation with Joseph. Mary has to wait while Joseph is able to, in his virtue, process everything, and eventually he surrenders to the Lord. Imagine everything that's happening in Joseph's life. He sees Mary with child, and his decision to divorce her quietly, and then of course the angel comes to him, and everything that stirs in his heart as he realizes that the Savior of the world, the promised Messiah, is coming, and he's going to be the father figure for that child. And of course the other guys in town are the other men in Nazareth are certainly judging Joseph because he didn't, quote unquote, take care of business and do what, quote unquote, a man would do. And man, so much has happened in Mary's life. So much has happened in Joseph's life. And as Mary moves in, as there are now just going through the ordinary rhythm of hearing each other's hearts and, quote unquote, learning how to be married. In the midst of all of that, here comes this news from the world that there's going to be a census, that a decree comes from Caesar Augustus that the whole world should be enrolled, that there's going to be a census. And that means that Joseph has to go to Bethlehem, that Mary and Joseph have to go to Bethlehem, and just imagine the way that they would have responded to that news. This is not in their plans. This is not convenient. There's been so much that has happened, and now something else happens, and God calls them to a place that was not in their plans, and maybe even a place that they didn't want to go. They're called to go to Bethlehem. God calls them in the midst of everything else to go to a place where they don't want to go. Mary and Joseph don't necessarily understand what's happening, but they know that they're called to go to a place that they don't want to go. Part of having a relationship with Christ is letting him call us. And there'll be a lot of times in our own life where we may be called to go somewhere where we don't want to go. I may be called to reconcile with somebody that we don't want to reconcile with, or we may be called to open up our hearts and forgive somebody that we don't want to forgive. We may be called to physically go someplace, to move, or to get a new job, or encounter some physical relocation that's not part of our plans. But whether it's a spiritual even or physical calling, God's a caller, as we see in the Old Testament, specifically in the prophets and in the lives of our legends in the New Testament. God calls, and you and I might be called to go someplace or do something that we might have a little resistance to. Certainly Mary and Joseph may not have wanted to go to Bethlehem, but they were called to do so. And here's the good news for us. Like, what we learn from Mary and Joseph is how to trust God in the call. It's real easy for us to take our eyes off the caller and to put our eyes on what we're being called to. And that's usually where the tension and the rub happens, is when God calls us to do something, or calls us to go somewhere, or calls us into something. It's easy for us to take our eyes off of him and then focus on what we're called to. And that's where the anxiety is. And if you look in your own life and look at my own life, that's what happens. Is my eyes are on the caller, and then once I'm called to, it's real easy to get like distracted or unfocused. And yet Mary and Joseph, throughout their journey to Bethlehem, as they were called to a place, they kept their eyes on God and each other, Let's learn from them today and never take our eyes off the caller, no matter what we're called to. And as you look at your own life, especially as now Christmas gets real close, if God's calling you to do something, let's not take our eyes off the one who's calling us to begin with. God bless you.